Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Kim Plomp. I am a bioarchaeologist. I study the human skeleton, health and disease, and human evolution.
And I'm Ross Barnett, study paleogenetics and the extinction of large mammals in the Pleistocene.
And today we're reviewing a movie called A.R.O.G. There's a subtitle, I think, that doesn't show up in most places, A Prehistoric Story or something like that. I'm going to guess you guys haven't heard of this one?
No. Ross, no?
No.
Some of our listeners may have, because this is, I think, an extremely big budget, very popular movie in Turkey. It's a Turkish movie. It's a sequel, which made it a little confusing at the beginning, but it's a sequel to, this movie is from 2008. It's a sequel to a movie called G.O.R.A. from 2004, which at the time was the most expensive movie in Turkish film industry history and one of the top grossing films of 2004. And it is apparently a very popular franchise. There was another sequel in 2018, and in 2022, Netflix picked up a series based on it. So despite the fact that we've never heard of it, it's probably an immensely popular movie in Turkey.
I can see how it could be, because I actually quite enjoyed it. I thought it was quite fun. I definitely laughed a lot more in this one than I have in some of the previous Hollywood versions of films that we've watched. So yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I liked it.
And I think a lot of the humor probably didn't translate. So if we actually understood the original Turkish, it might have been even funnier. But I agree, it was there were a lot of really good jokes in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, who wants to summarize this one?
Ross is always better at paying attention to these things than I am. I got a bit lost with the whole space stuff.
Well, I can try, but what usually happens is I kind of follow my notes, and then about halfway through, the writing gets too difficult to read, and I go off into a tangent. But yeah, I mean, as Josh said, it's a sequel, but you don't really, I think, need to know what happens in the sequel. It's kind of quite well signposted in the first sort of 10 or 15 minutes of the film. So the kind of background is, from what I've worked out in the first film, is that this fairly average Turkish guy called Arif somehow went to a different galaxy and met a female alien called Cheku, who despite him being about, I'll be generous, saying 30 years and several attractiveness classes different from Cheku, they end up falling in love and getting married, despite the evil intentions of a bad guy called Logar, who is, incidentally and confusingly, played by the same actor that plays the main character of Arif. And the kind of differences between Logar and Arif are quite good. I didn't realize until about 15 minutes in that they were the same actor. So that was quite...
I didn't even know until you said it.
Really?
No.
There you go. That's where it is. So,
but did you realize that the caveman bad guy was also played by the same character? He played 3 characters in this movie.
I did not realize that.
Did not notice. No.
Wow.
The chief of the bad guy tribe.
Okay. Well, there you go. He's a regular Turkish Mike Myers. So that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's probably what happened in the first film. There's some kind of almost thwarted romance between Arif and Cheku, and Logar, the baddie, has been trying to get in their way, but love conquered all. And so at the beginning, Cheku is pregnant with their child. They're about to, I think, get married and go back to Cheku's home planet of G.O.R.A. to have the baby. But they're
so that it has dual citizenship.
So that has dual citizenship. But unfortunately, Arif, being the kind of wide boy that he appears to be, sold Cheku's spaceship for scrap and got a very bad price for it. He only realizes later that it's made out of titanium. And so he could have got a lot more than the, I think, 4 lira or whatever it was that he got for it. So Cheku and Arif have all these big plans. They're a bit scuppered because Cheku wants to go back to her planet, but they don't have a spacecraft. She is learning about Earth, so one of the things that she does is watch television and go on the internet, and she asks Arif, did people really evolve from monkeys? That's one of her questions, which is kind of foreshadowing some of the things that I guess go on later on. So that's the kind of setup. And then what happens is Lorgar appears again, the baddie. He kind of comes in through the airport, does some very maniacal swishing of his evil cape, which I appreciated. There was some good evil cape swishing going on. And he pretends, although we don't realize at first, he appears to have turned over a new leaf. And so Lorgar is very friendly. He says that he wants to help Arif and Cheku, and he'll lend them his spaceship so they can get back to G.O.R.A, so that she can have her baby there to get dual citizenship. And so he says that Arif has to come and meet him and get the keys to the spaceship, but it was a trick. It was all a trick. He's still totally evil. He still has plans to break up Cheku and Arif, and he imprisons Arif in, it looks like the thing that imprisons Mr. Incredible in The Incredibles, this kind of round power ring that he is helplessly bound to. And he kind of starts monologuing, and he says that his plan is to sort of take over Arif's place. He's going to copy his clothes, copy his voice, copy his hairstyle, which Arif is very incredulous of because he has an amazing kind of greased comb over, I think is the only way to describe it. And he says that Lorgar will never get it right. But so they have this kind of amazing kind of pop culture riff where Lorgar says he's going to use the face-off machine, like the face-off film with John Travolta and Nick Cage. And there's all this kind of swishing machinery. And I laughed out loud at this bit. They have all this swishing machinery, and it looks like they're going to, scientifically kind of remove his face and replace it with Arif's. But actually all that happens is this incredibly advanced machinery takes out a tiny little pencil moustache, which Arif is very proud of, and puts it onto Lorgar, and then they're essentially indistinguishable, which was hugely funny. And so, as part of his plan, as well as changing his kind of appearance to that of Arif, he's going to send Arif back 500,000 years into the past. And Arif says, why 500,000? Why not send me 1 million? And so he says, yeah, good idea. And so, using his power of time travel, which he also has, he sends Arif back in time to 1 million years. Although, interestingly, Arif's phone still works. So the first thing he does when he gets back to 1 million years is his phone, somebody, I couldn't quite figure out who, in the present day. I mean, we've got to suspend disbelief that somehow he managed to contact someone in present day using a mobile phone. But anyway, they have a kind of weird conversation in English and Turkish. But I didn't fully get all the implications of that. But he kind of realizes he's 1 million years in the past. He sees, of course, dinosaurs, pterosaurs, all sorts of prehistoric life. He doesn't see any of the prehistoric life that would actually be there around 1 million years. No mammoths, no saber-tooths, no mammals of any kind, but lots of theropods, lots of small kind of, I guess, ornithomimids or Compsognathus, something like that. Little small meat eaters that kind of move in flocks. And the animations of these are really cool, actually. I thought for the budget that it had, which wasn't huge, they did a really good job of making the dinosaurs lifelike. Anyway, so this is this kind of start of his adventure. He's marooned 1 million years in the past. He has to get back to the present day, to his kind of own time, to stop Lorgar taking Cheku away from him. And that's his kind of narrative arc that he has to follow. So he kind of wanders around. He finds some hominids, sort of simian type chimps, people in chimp outfits essentially, but quite good chimp outfits. I mean, these are at least the standard of Planet of the Apes, if not a bit higher. He tries to teach them to stand upright. They're not really having any of it, but he does hang around with them for a bit. I kind of thought that maybe the Ice Age started overnight, but it was really just a bit of snow. So cold that when he goes for his morning pee in the morning, it freezes. He has enough. He has enough of the 8 people, and so he disappears. And just as he disappears, the kind of monolith from 2001 drops down from the sky, and I guess accelerates the evolution of the chimps. He starts dowsing for water because that's what he needs. So he's got a dowsing rod. He discovers a snake, and then he says, "Oh, there's no evolution; it's still just a snake," which is interesting because that's very much a kind of creationist school of thought. But while he's looking for his water, he bumps into a T-Rex or some other kind of equivalent theropod. I didn't get a good look at its arms to see whether it was T-Rex or something else. But they kind of get off on the wrong foot. He thinks it's trying to eat him, but actually it's just protecting its eggs. It seems to be a lot smarter than even the monkeys. And so he basically backs off and says he's not going to bother their eggs. And the T-Rex gives him knocks down a hive of honey for him, which is nice because he's hungry. And then, weirdly, despite it being a beehive, a giant hornet wasp appears. That's kind of weird, and starts to chase after him and stings him on the head. And then, also weirdly, he says, "How do you treat a bee sting? Ammonia," which is what you treat bee stings with. So bees have an acidic sting, and so you have to treat them with the base. But wasps and hornets have an alkali sting, and so you've got to treat them with an acid. So if you get stung with ammonia is a good treatment, or some other kind of weak base. If you get stung by a wasp, you want to put a weak acid on it, so vinegar or lemon juice or something like that. So a bit of confusion there, a bit of entomological confusion, but never mind. He's still wandering around. He's had his honey. He gets captured by some cave people, who are the first group of the 2 that we meet. I think these are the A.R.O.Gians. Am I correct in that?
I think so.
The ones that have banned all inventions.
Yeah.
So these guys have, for reasons that are never actually fully made 100% clear, have banned all things that are new. So they're not allowed to write or draw or have big spears and good lithic technology and all that kind of stuff. While he's getting captured by them, we kind of meet a few of them. So we meet the kind of chief. We meet Tazo, who's like the son of the chief, and who's a kind of thwarted artist. He has lots of artistic skills. And while he's getting taken away, Tazo breaks his arm. I think he falls off something, and his arm gets broken. And obviously, in caveman times, they give him up for dead. You break your arm, you're done for. So they start to bury him. But Arif, being a modern man, realizes that doesn't have to be the end. He splints the arm, and so they kind of build a rapport through him saving him from being buried alive and a terrible death from a broken arm. We go back to the kind of A.R.O.Gians camp. We discover a bit of their background. So the original chief, so Tazo's grandfather, was killed, and they were very upset by this, so they decided to build a rock tower up to heaven, which is basically like a kind of massive obelisk, with the plan that they'll go up to heaven and rescue Tazo's grandfather and bring him back to the tribe. There's a kind of quite slapsticky bit where Arif gets forced to go and climb the tower, and he gets to the top, and he meets the grandfather, the original chief, and accidentally kind of pushes him off the edge, finds him holding on by 2 hands, gives him a cigarette to kind of calm his nerves, and tells him to cup the cigarette so he can light it. And of course, the original chief uses both hands and falls to his death, which is a kind of it's the kind of push point for Arif to say that smoking will kill you, which is also quite amusing. Yeah. So he comes back down. Apparently, he's the only person to have made it back down from the stone tower. So the A.R.O.Gians kind of treat him with a little bit of respect. Tazo shows him some of his drawings. He sees that he's drawing some nice horses. We don't see horses anywhere in the film, but he's drawn some horses in a kind of Lascaux Magdalenian style polychrome. Very nice. But he's also hidden away on his artistic wall a very nice drawing of a girl from a different tribe called Mimi, who he's madly in love with. So madly in love with that he's actually managed to tattoo her face onto his back in a full kind of back tattoo. Which, considering that he's hardly even spoke to her, is quite appalling, really, I would say. So Arif decides, being a modern man, that he will teach Tazo how to woo Mimi, how to sophisticatedly seduce her, which seems to involve just having a bath and giving her flowers. I mean, it's not rocket science. But he also...
To be fair, that would get me.
He also enlists Tazo help to try and break into where all the forbidden inventions are stored, the cave of forbidden inventions, to see if there's anything that will help him get back to his own time. But all this is kind of getting in the way. Arif's getting frustrated because he wants to somehow advance the cave people's civilization so that they will kind of progress through all the stages from the kind of Paleolithic to the Neolithic to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age and on to his own time, so that they will invent a time machine for him to get back or something. It doesn't really make a lot of sense if you sit and think about it, but it does make as a setup for a lot of I guess very funny gags in Turkish. So he's kind of left Mimi and Tazo to kind of get to know each other. He's trying to advance Mimi's tribe, because by this point they've broken into the cave of forbidden invention, stolen them and taken them to Mimi's tribe. They've been exiled by Tazo's father. They've been banished, which is a very classic trope from all of the cave people movies that we've watched, where you have two tribes go to war. Unfortunately, there is no time machine in the cave of forbidden inventions. The most advanced item they find is a Betamax video player, which apparently fell from the heavens. Which is quite funny. That's not what you expect to find, and Arif is pissed off because there's not even any videos for it. But back at Mimi's tribe, they're trying to advance civilization. They've kind of somehow invented agriculture using all the inventions that they've stolen. Arif's made a dinosaur-powered flour mill, which is pretty cool. He's got one of the little compsognathids to kind of run in a wheel, which turns the mill to grind the grain, which is great. They start teaching the kids, and this bit went on for quite a while. Mimi becomes a teacher of all the tribe's children, and I think it must be a satire on education in Turkey, because I didn't fully get it, but there was clearly something going on there about teaching methods and that kind of thing. So I guess that would have made more sense if I had a better understanding of Turkish education. But anyway, at the meantime, what's going on? Arif's still kind of trying to persuade Tazo to get with Mimi. He gives her some. He gives him some mints. They invent alcohol, so they invent raki and how to drink it, which leads to Tazo getting a bit drunk, and so he needs some breath mints to freshen up, so that Mimi doesn't think he's a drunkard. Unfortunately, at the same time, Arif mistakes one of the mints for the Viagra pill, which he bought at the beginning of the film. And so that leads to lots of lowbrow comedy with him. It's fairly strongly implied that he goes off with the chimpanzees and sleeps with one of the chimps, isn't it? Yes. I didn't just read too much into it.
This is the second movie that's done that. And it's always kind of jarring.
Yes.
It is. So that's what's going on there. And I guess he'll blame the syphilis, but, that's not really going to cut it. And then the kind of showdown becomes that the A.R.O.Gians are pissed off that the other tribe have stolen all their inventions. They're kind of going to go to war, and then very subtly they decide to not go to war, but to settle their differences with a football match. And so it kind of segues.
Also, the second movie that's done that.
Yeah, it kind of segues into a prehistoric football match. And unfortunately, the A.R.O.Gians are expert football players. I got the impression that some of the actors on the A.R.O.Gian football team were real footballers, maybe from the Turkish team or something.
They looked
like they could have been.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the Rogians' tradition is to play football, whereas Mimi's tribe, I don't know if they even have a name, but the other tribe have no football experience. So that quite a lot of the rest of the movie is taken up with like a training montage of how to get cave people to play football. And the time comes, they go to the arena. Obviously, it's like an underdog story, so they have the rules are first to 5, they swap ends, first to 10 wins, and so it goes 5-0, 5-5, 9-5, 9-9, and then all of a sudden they're about to win. The good guys, not the A.R.O.Gians, the other ones, and then one of their players gets abducted by a pterosaur, which leads to a penalty. But at the same time, the chief of the good guy tribe, he's saved the. Did he save the penalty and that messes up his hands, or is it a previous goal that he saved? I can't remember. He saves a goal essentially, and the power of it is so much that his hands get all messed up, and so they have to call on the old guy that invented Raki in the tribe to be their new goalie, which actually works because these guys have plot armor, and so they're never going to lose. And Arif, somehow, it's not explained particularly how, he's developed some superpowers which only appear when bread is broken over his head.
That must have happened in the first movie.
Yeah.
I guess. So he can, Matrix style, jump in the air and stay there, and he uses these powers to score the winning goal. And then everything's over, everyone celebrates. He is kind of resigned to his fate that he's going to have to stay around in 1 million years BP. But then, all of a sudden, a time ball appears, and out steps Cheku, his wife, who's pregnant with his kid. And so he's overjoyed. And what's happened is that basically, the second that Arif went off with Logar at the beginning of the film to go and see the spaceship when he gets abducted, Cheku on the internet discovers a news story about some 1 million year old graffiti that's been found, which Arif had done earlier in the film when he gets back to 1 million years ago, of how Arif loves Cheku, and that makes her realize that Logar's tricked her, sent Arif back in time, and so she knows what's what. And when Logar comes around dressed as Arif, she immediately knows that it's Logar because he hasn't put his contacts in properly, and as Arif predicted, he's not managed to get the hair right. He's got the parting on the wrong side. And so she uses his time travel technology to go back in time and rescue Arif. And then they go back to the future and live happily ever after. And then the very last scene is Logar getting sent back in time with his own time machine, and a T-Rex turns up and eats him. And that's it. Happy endings all round. Everyone in their proper place. And yeah, it was a fun time. I quite liked it.
Yeah, I didn't like the overall movie. I found kind of boring, like the storyline, but the jokes I really thought were funny. Like I enjoyed the characters and the jokes. Don't really care about prehistoric football, but
no,
it wasn't as good as the Wallace and Gromit one.
But it is interesting that seems to be like almost a trope, like the prehistoric football.
Mm-hmm.
Did early man sort of steal from A.R.O.G or whatever this film's A.R.O.G?
A.R.O.G?
A.R.O.G, yeah, maybe.
What year was early man? Was it like 2018?
And this is 2008, isn't it? So
yeah.
And it was the same idea where they're doing it in order to get their freedom, right? They were enslaved people from this other civilization.
And then also I guess the other trope that we kind of touched on is sexing the monkey. Yeah.
But apart from those two things, so this movie is almost entirely set in the Stone Age. It's full of Stone Age content, and yet as I'm watching it, I'm like, I don't know what we're going to comment on, because most of the movies, like, they draw inspiration from real life finds, or they have real misconceptions or things like this. This movie, I think, is what happens when you have a society that doesn't teach evolution, make a movie about the Stone Age, and there's just, like, it just seems like everything is just based on other movies, like pop culture knowledge. There's no real like I'm not sure what we're going to comment on because there's just nothing factual in any of it.
No.
You know?
Yeah.
There was even something.
Definitely.
There was a comment that he made at the end that was very creationalist. What was it?
Was it maybe we didn't evolve from monkeys, but we are devolving to monkeys? Is that it?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
He says his final monologue is, "The books show you bent and twisted.
Yes.
They show you to be like monkeys. What a lie that is. Maybe we didn't evolve from monkeys, but we sure are evolving to monkeys."
Yes. That's what he said. What a lie that is. So,
yeah. So he makes a lot of comments about like how evolution isn't real, but it's like there's not even really much to comment on that because it's just basically saying, nope, evolution's not real. Here's the rest of the movie, and then again, nope, evolution's not real. So Ross, he already commented on how his wife right at the beginning is looking on the internet and she's like, did people really evolve from monkeys? And then there's the snake. He says, no evolution, it's just like any other snake. And then there's another scene where when he's trying to teach Tasso how to get Mimi, I didn't quite understand this. He says, I'm going to ask you something, but it may be a little personal. Did we come from monkeys? And then Tasso says, no, we came from the village together.
That's funny.
I think the implication there might have been like a rhetorical question. Did we evolve from monkeys? No, of course not. We are humans, so you're capable of romancing this woman or something like that, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting the kind of approach they take. So it's not there's not a blatantly religious angle to it in the way that, for example, Inherit the Wind has a clear religious angle that's anti-evolution and anti-scientific. Whereas this is just like, nope, we don't need to think about that. Don't look at the man behind the curtain kind of approach.
Well, and he says when she asks them, like, did we evolve from monkeys? He's like, don't look, what are you doing looking up on internet? Like, don't do that. It'll fill your head with lies. So
yeah, don't worry your pretty little head kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I almost got the feeling that so it's not like a propaganda film. No. It's not trying to teach anti-evolution, but I got the feeling that maybe this is just sort of the result of like a Turkish identity where they're trying to maintain their like Muslim worldview in the face of sort of being on the edge of the Western world, which is dominated by the scientific worldview.
Yeah.
In kind of the same way that in Canada, especially in the 90s, a lot of our popular culture was dominated by showing that we're not American. So I bet you could watch a lot of Canadian movies and things from the 90s that just sort of, you know, maybe to someone who's not from Canada, sort of arbitrarily just sort of compare ourselves to American and show how we're different. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe it's just like the Turkish national identity is sort of like, we are the culture that doesn't believe in evolution. And then it just has these sort of comments like, no evolution, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely Turkey has been in the news a lot for particular kind of anti-evolution stance. So, you know, I think it's worth talking a bit about Adnan Oktar and the Atlas of Creation, which is Turkish produced, Turkish financed. So the Atlas of Creation was sent to a whole bunch of people worldwide in biology departments and science departments at universities and schools for free. And it's kind of fairly notorious amongst, I guess, academic circles. If you don't have a copy, you know someone that's received one. It was almost a badge of honor, I think, to get one when they were being sent out about 10, 15 years ago. I certainly know a couple of people that got them. And they're just kind of lavishly produced full color, telephone directory size books, which kind of show, I guess, Islamic creationist argument, which is basically, look at these pictures of fossils, look at these pictures of modern day animals. There's not enough difference, therefore evolution didn't happen, which, you know, is superficially possibly quite convincing, not to the audience that it was sent to. I mean, your average academic biologist or historian of science is not going to fall for that, but secondary schools and non-biologists might. And so it was funded by this guy called Adnan Oktar, who writes under the pen name of Harun Yahya, who was the face of Islamic creationism and the face of Turkish creationism, I guess, as well. And his kind kind of shadowy financing and background really influenced, I think, a lot of the Turkish public education. And so, I mean, Turkey is, at least nominally, a secular state. Its founder was an atheist and didn't want religion to interfere with public education, with public society. And so nominally, although that has changed, as all kind of founders' intentions tend to, that has changed. And so the kind of creationist works of A.R.O.G have kind of been exported worldwide as the kind of alternative to kind of Christian creationism, a way of saying, it's not just these right-wing evangelicals. We've also got right-wing Islamists that are creationists, and that's because it is a religious position. It's an Abrahamic religious position, so that's why it's common to Islam, Christianity, Judaism. Those are the three main Abrahamic religions, and they also all have sections of them which are strongly creationist because of reasons. But yeah, I mean, A.R.O.G is a very, very, very creepy guy. He's a wrong'un, like through and through, and he's currently in jail for. I looked it up on Wikipedia because he's currently in jail for 8,658 years in Turkey for running a sex trafficking cult, essentially, and drugs offences, etc., etc. So, like many people that use the cloak of religion and claim to be, holier than thou, they use it as a smokescreen to cover all sorts of nefarious activities. And this guy was no different. I remember he used to put out very, well, I'm not going to say swish, but very expensive looking, but cheap expensive looking, like Trump expensive looking, lots of gold and marble, that kind of nonsense. He used to put out these kind of roundtable discussions, which were always populated by some very plastic-looking women who had obviously been through extensive rounds of plastic surgery, and they were reading off scripts which had been clearly written by A.R.O.G, and these kind of pretend back and forth discussions about why evolution was false. Essentially kind of sexy fishing for converts. Trying to reel them in with sex appeal, that kind of stuff. And it turns out that actually some of these women had been trafficked into his organization, and that's why he's now in jail for nearly 9 millennia. And there you go. Yeah, he's a bad dude.
He serves every day of it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's worth, if you ever get a chance to have a look at the Atlas of Creation, it's definitely worth a look. It's such a kind of weird book. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff in there that will, wouldn't have made it past any kind of proper rigorous screening. So there's one particularly well recognized howler where they've shown a fossil of, I think it's some kind of insect, and then they've shown, and here's a modern insect to show that they haven't changed at all. But the modern insect they've used is a fly, a fishing fly. It's made out of wire and bits of feather. So yeah, that's it. The evolution of fishing.
What was the book called?
Atlas of Creation.
Oh yeah.
As with most like religious proselytizing materials, it looks like it shouldn't be too hard to find this. I am opening a PDF of it as we speak, but it's taking a long time because it's 870 pages. But assuming this is the correct book, I will link this in the show notes. Another interesting thing just about the movie in general is that we watched this on YouTube. The title was just Stone Age Movie because as part of my job with this podcast, sometimes I just Google Stone Age movies and see what comes up. So it didn't actually have the name of, it said failed to load PDF document. Well, I'll try again later and see if we can get that in the show notes. It didn't actually have the name of the movie on the YouTube link that we watched, but if you actually search for it by name on YouTube, you can get dozens of full uploads of this movie, and some of them have like 25 million views. So this movie is not hard to find. It's uploaded everywhere. The original, the first movie, G.O.R.A, is actually available on Netflix in Canada. So I'm not sure if A.R.O.G might be available on Netflix in some countries as well. But if you wanted to watch this movie, it's very easy to find it once you know how to look for it. So another thing about this Atlas of Creation, for context, is that this big distribution event you're talking about, where they mailed it out to all these biologists, happened in 2007, and this movie came out in 2008. So I'm sure this was something that was being talked about, and I'm sure that influenced the development of this movie in some way.
And I mean, it has influenced, I think, public education in Turkey as well. I mean, there's clearly been a lot of money funneled into this now banned organization that produced the Atlas of Creation. And like with the Deep South and Kitzmiller versus Dover and all these kind of attempts to get creationism in by the back door, that's kind of happening, or has happened in Turkey. And so, as far as I know, evolution is not part of the public education curriculum in Turkey now, and you won't hear about it during compulsory education at all.
Yeah, it was officially banned in 2017 for primary schools. So they can still teach it in universities, but it's illegal to teach evolution to school children in Turkey.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, they're at the state where they need a Scopes monkey trial in Ankara or Istanbul or somewhere to jumpstart things a bit. I
wonder how successful something like that could be in Turkey, because there was a survey from 2006, which I've cited in a lot of my courses, that surveyed belief in evolution across 34 countries, mostly European, but also including the United States and Japan. And Turkey was the lowest on that list, right below the United States, interestingly enough, which is why this story was so big at the time, because the United States had just slightly higher levels of belief in evolution than Turkey. But the question they asked was, they asked people to respond true or false. Human beings, as we know them, developed from earlier species of animals. And in Turkey, the response was about 25% true to that statement. In the United States, it was about 40%.
Yeah, but I guess also you have to imagine that number is a massive improvement from the Scopes time when that trial was underway, and that through the efforts of those, they've managed to increase awareness and understanding of evolution.
Yeah.
Well, normally we start our episodes nitpicking the scientific mistakes in the movie, and we didn't do that on this one. Is it worth doing that at all?
I mean, most of the mistakes are things that we've been over so many times, like dinosaurs and humans don't coexist, and evolution. I mean, they had cultural evolution the idea of cultural evolution be quite linear, right? Like he had this idea that you start from one end and you just keep that there's a formula that you follow, and if you follow that you'll end up with modern civilization, which is not correct.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well. It's not something that really gets a lot of serious thought, I guess, in the kind of Hollywood movies that we've talked about. The kind of teleology of you always have to have, you can basically force a movement from Stone Age to Metal Ages to modern times. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's something that would occur to many kind of Western script writers as something that would make sense to an audience.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm giving the audience too much credit. I don't know.
Hard to say.
Oh, there's one little statement right at the end. The news reporter, when they're talking about the discovery of R.F.'s cave painting, they say that carbon tests show the paintings to be between 500,000 and 1 million years old, and there's 4 things wrong with that statement. So you can't do carbon dating for anything older than about 50 to 70,000, because at that point all of the radioactive carbon has decayed and there's nothing left. So 500,000 to 1 million is way too old for carbon dating. Second, it's pretty difficult to carbon date paintings, or to date paintings at all. Mm-hmm. Third, 500,000 to 1 million is a pretty big error range. Normally, I'd hope we'd get something a little more precise than that.
Yeah. But I mean, you can carbon date actual kind of late Paleolithic cave paintings where they've used charcoal or carbon-based paints. That can be and has been done. So that's how we have kind of dates for places like Lascaux and Chauvet and Altamira and places like that, because they've used charcoal, which is essentially carbon that's come from a living tree. And the kind of AMS methods, the accelerated mass spectroscopy methods of radiocarbon today use, on the order of a few milligrams of material. So it can be done. And I guess there's also alternative dating methods for that kind of time period. Like if you look at kind of flowstone analysis of if flowstone has covered carvings on a wall, they can use that and have used that in the past. So I mean, definitely this glosses over the fact that dating cave paintings is difficult, but also really interesting and worth kind of looking into.
Yeah, my understanding is one of the reasons it's difficult to date even paintings that are carbon-based is just because they're just carbon on a surface. So, like, all of the dirt and stuff in the air, like if there's soot in the air from things like that, it'll adhere to the surface. And then when you scrape off some of that carbon paint to date it, you're getting younger carbon along with it. Mm-hmm. So it's going to skew your results.
And, if caves are limestone, calcium carbonate, you've got scrape some of that off. You've got carbon in there too in the stone, and that's not going to do your dating any favors. That's going to be old carbon.
Yeah, there's that one, I forget which cave painting it is, but they've taken samples from different parts of the artwork, and they've gotten completely different dates from each part. And so, is it that they've added on to the artwork afterwards? Probably not for that big of a gap, right? But so there's something happening with the preservation.
It's a good point that people do tend to take carbon dates as, for want of a better word, as gospel. But there's a lot of uncertainty, not just with the dates themselves in terms of the error ranges, but is the carbon that you're dating only from the thing that you want to date? Has it been contaminated? Are you looking at something like Kim said? Is it a retouching of a painting that was done, 10,000 years after the original painting was done? All these kind of questions. Yeah. It's just the nature of the science that you might get an answer, but how much trust do you put in the answer? How certain can you be?
Then now they're saying that we've messed with the environment so much, especially with the atom bombs and stuff, that our way of radiocarbon dating isn't going to work from anything modern now, right? So in the future, if they try and radiocarbon date stuff from now, it's going to have to be completely recalibrated. And that's assuming that the carbon in the environment from now till then stays stable, right? Because I think it's the last 50 years or so, we've just messed with it. So
yeah. So that's why all radiocarbon dates are before kind of 1950. That's the kind of cutoff point for when the H-bomb tests were done. But I mean, you can sort of date stuff post 1950 just by looking at the spikes of particular radioactive isotopes in there, because yes, we've messed the atmosphere up and sort of filled it full of weird radioactive isotopes that you wouldn't normally find, but at least we know when and where those isotopes were put into the atmosphere.
Yeah,
for the most part.
Interesting.
Josh, do you know of any of the newer sequels to this film? Do they have a prehistoric setting or illusion or anything like that? Where do they go?
There's more of these, but the bad guy died.
The third in the series from 2018 is called Arif V216. They all have terrible names. I wonder if these names are more culturally meaningful in Turkish. I think there's a robot named 216 in the first movie. And so in the third movie, this robot comes from G.O.R.A to Earth and meets up with Arif and wants to become a human or something. I think that's the premise of it. And then they go back in time to 1969. I'm not sure why.
Well, why wouldn't you? I mean, if you had a time machine, that's a pretty good time to pick.
Yeah.
And then the Netflix series, I don't know anything about it. I wasn't able to find it. I didn't look very hard for that, though. But I don't think any of the others have to do anything with the Stone Age at all, unfortunately.
Oh, well.
Maybe we can go over some of our favorite jokes. There's two types of joke in this movie that I really like that they do constantly. One of them is just constantly referencing other movies. Like they're always talking about other movies. In the scene where Logar has RF trapped in the Incredibles magic electric handcuff ring or something, whatever it is called. Yeah. He's like monologuing to him, and he's talking about how he's going to, after he's stolen his identity and he looks exactly like him, except his hair is parted from the wrong side. He tells his little sidekick to bring him the thing from the Tom Cruise movie, and he hands him the mask from Eyes Wide Shut. He holds it up to his face, and then the chanting music starts, and then he pulls it off his face. He's like, no, not that movie, the other movie. And then he brings him some voice changing thing. I don't know what movie that's from. Is it from
Mission Impossible?
Mission Impossible or something?
I imagine it would be.
And then Arif is constantly making references to movies. Like he sees the Tyrannosaurus and he's like, oh, I know you from Jurassic Park. I've seen all your movies, right?
What I enjoyed is when he was just talking to the tribe at first, and they realized they could speak the same language or something, and one of the guys finally, and it kind of says something in a huff and walks off, and Arif's like, wait, there was no subtitles for that. What was that? That was funny.
Yeah, that's my other favorite type of joke is the breaking the fourth wall. They do that constantly in this movie.
It's a very film-literate film, isn't it? I mean, there's like at least, a dozen, 24 other films that are referenced just by Arif. Like Braveheart's in there, Tom Cruise, what else? Jurassic Park, Face Off, all sorts of stuff, which makes it quite funny.
Yeah, it's done well. Even silly jokes, I quite like when he was asking after the Face Off thing, he asked for the remote for the time machine, and so the guy hands it to him, and then he turns it on, and then a little automated car or whatever, like the toy thing, drives by, and then he's like, no, the other one.
It's almost cute. A bit kind of Naked Gun style, that kind of just constant visual jokes, which is funny. My favorite one was definitely the Face Off moustache. That was I found that very amusing.
I feel like during it's not as good as like other Leslie Nielsen slapstick movies because the jokes aren't quite as constant, and especially during the football match at the end, it really sort of slows down. I think you have to have sort of this non-North American interest in football to really care about that scene very much. But they make a lot of fourth wall breaking jokes in that football game. There's one where the goalie makes a big save in slow motion, and you can see clearly it's a different actor. Yeah. And the opposite team says, "Hey, you're lying. That's a different person." And he's like, "Well, it was a stunt double. What do you expect? He's going to do it himself." And another one, they make a big goal, and the bad guys make a goal, and then there's an instant replay that says like replay in the corner where they make the same goal in slow motion. And then cuts back to real time, and the bad guys are like, "Yeah, that's a second goal for us." And they're like, that doesn't count as a goal. That was a replay. Well, I guess if you want commentary on all of the actual archaeological stuff in here, go check out our other episodes where we talk about tattoos in the Iceman episode, where we talk about, I think we probably talk about pottery in quite a few episodes. We talk about cave paintings in Alpha, and in lots of episodes we talk about cave paintings, right? Yeah. The Descent.
And football. We talk about football. No.
Football. Talk about football in the Early Man. This is not a very science-heavy episode, I suppose.
No. But I think it was nice to have a film which you had no kind of preconceptions about and actually enjoy it, because it was
when it first
fun.
started with the spaceman and stuff, I wasn't quite sure, because you're like, okay, this could either be hilarious or horrible, and I really was like, I don't know. But yeah, it was good.
I was fully prepared to have my movie choosing privileges taken away
really
for
thought
another
we were
3
going
episodes
to.
after this one.
I was like, Josh.
Almost by accident, you've managed to find a good film. That's great.
This will be a good episode to ask our listeners, if you like this podcast, tell your friends about this podcast, because the movies, the big blockbuster movies that we cover get a lot of listens. These really obscure ones don't get a lot of listens. But I like doing these ones because they let us watch something we never would have otherwise heard about.
Yeah, definitely. I've watched Lots lot of movies ideas in the last 2 years that I would have never watched or heard about or thought about.
Same. We should also mention that Josh is due congratulations, because his talk about this podcast won the award for Best Talk. So,
at the very prestigious Paleoanthropological Society of Canada conference that had about 25 attendees.
Don't knock it. Good, though. It's good for the CV.
Yeah, and it was our first conference that wasn't attached to the Canadian Association of Physical Anthropology. So it was the first standalone conference for the society. It's only a few years old. I think that's pretty good. I did not stay, sorry. I went to bed after my talk.
Did you give yours remotely?
Yes, Kim, you presented at about midnight, right?
Yeah, I presented at midnight here.
Did any cats make an appearance?
I don't think so. But I was fighting off a migraine all day, so I was on my migraine medication, so I actually wasn't nervous for the talk at all. And
great.
It was actually really, I just gave it without worrying about anything. So yeah, it's kind of the way to do it.
Yeah. Don't try that at home, kids.
Well, do we want to wrap up this episode on A.R.O.G? One thing we never mentioned is, for some reason, both G.O.R.A and A.R.O.G are abbreviated A.R.O.G, and I never understood that, because A.R.O.G just seems to be the name of the village, and G.O.R.A just seems to be the name of the planet.
I found that confusing too, and I kept Googling Argos, which would take me to that shop in the UK.
Did you get anything?
No.
Yeah, I'm guessing it must be explained in the first film why, and then the second film is just an anagram, which has maybe no meaning. I don't know.
Well, I like this one. I thought it was very funny. I'm sure it would be a lot funnier if you spoke Turkish.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the one thing that I did enjoy too is that, so at the beginning when she's looking at the internet, she says, "Did people come from monkeys?" And he says, "What are you doing on the internet? You're learning all this silly stuff. Put it away, put it away." And it's her being on the internet that saves him, right? Because she's paying attention, and that's when she notices. So,
good point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we usually mention whether or not the movie passes the Bechdel test, and this one definitely does not.
No.
There are two main women characters who are only love interests.
Never in the same scene together. No.
Never in the same parallel dimension, apart from about 5 seconds.
Yeah. It's so astonishing how few movies pass the Bechdel test once you start paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't, it's half the population of the world. It doesn't make sense why.
That's why you can't go wrong with Aliens. The film.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestonage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.